It's really, really crazy.
So look, I mean, I think the moral of the story for entrepreneurs, I mean, I think there's a couple of takeaways here. Number one, you got to be really clear with the present state of your business. It's okay to talk about your grand vision and what you're going to do in the future, but you cannot be inaccurate in any way with respect to your current numbers and partnerships and deals and current capabilities. I think number two, I think when you start working with the media in this way to promote your company, you're playing with fire. Because the media really has two kinds of stories. They build up and they tear down. And when they're done building you up, they're going to tear you down because that's the only story left to write. So if you're going to go court the media in that way to try and get publicity, you better be really careful how you do it. And you better be really accurate. And you better not give them cause to later regret pumping you up because they will tear you down even harder if you do that.
I think the more important danger that I just like to speak generally to for a second is to not let other people do your thinking for you. The investors that came into this business came in under the assumption that this was a real business because the press had written about it. And the press wrote about it because the general had joined the board. And the general joined the board because his buddy, George Shultz, said, hey, you should meet this lady. And the whole thing ended up becoming this roundabout where no one actually did any original thinking and no one did any actual diligence. And the whole thing ended up being this.
I'm sorry, but now you're talking about actually how Silicon Valley works. So that's fucking bullshit.
Yeah.
Okay, you don't think these dopes run around thinking, oh, if Sequoia, if Benchmark, Social Capital, Kraft Invest, I'm just plowing the money in? Of course they do. They don't even think.
Social proof.
They assume that we've done our diligence.
No, Shamad,
you think they're doing principal diligence? These like the Silicon Valley ecosystem. I'll also say
this is also how the Bernie Madoff scandal, got so far ahead of itself. No one actually went in and did the audits of those financials. Everyone assumed that because someone else is in this thing and because someone else is involved or something nice has been written about it or said about it, it's worth backing. And like the lack of original thinking in business and life in general, I think is, one of the biggest, risks that each of us takes. And it's why it's really important to learn how to think for yourself.
I have deep respect for early stage investors because they have to get in and make some critical decisions. Some people make those decisions about the team, right? The psychology of the co-founders. Sometimes it's about the end market. And sometimes it's about a deep analysis of the traction. But you have to, let's be honest, there is a valley of funding between the Series A and maybe the D or the E, where I really think a lot of folks just look for signaling value based on who the Series A investors were.
They make blind bets.
I'm not sure that those family offices were any worse or any better. Like maybe the DeVos family looked at Rupert Murdoch and said, he's smart, so I'm in.
Yeah,
that's exactly what happened.
That's so different than all these Series B and C firms that say, oh, Benchmark's in, I'm in.
Totally.
It's the exact same thing.
Totally.
I literally had a situation, and I think I brought it up in a previous episode, where I was working on a deal. It wasn't like a major check for us. It was, a six-figure check. And they said, none of the other firms are asking for diligence. Why should we give it to you? And I was like, how much are they putting in?
It's crazy.
And they were putting in more money than I was. They were putting seven figures in.
Crazy.
And I said,
because I have LPs. When you ask for diligence now, some of these founders look at you like, how dare you?
Yeah. Exactly. In this case, they were insulted and they said, we're not giving you diligence. And we walked away.
It's like buying a house without visiting the house.
Yeah, they buy it without
this company that Dave and I called, David was calling it Theranos 2.0, but this company couldn't even explain gross revenue. It was like gross revenue asterisk. And it's like, if there's one metric on a P&L that can never have an asterisk, ever.
The top line.
The top line.
Gross revenue.
The money that came into your bank account.
How much customers pay you?
I get
adjusted EBITDA. Yeah. I get EBITDA. I get GAAP. I get it. Okay. But gross revenue asterisks?
How much money is in the register? About? Open the register and count the money.
Yeah. And so I just remember asking the simple question like, can you just take the asterisks away and just tell me what
this is a company the two of you were looking at together?
You and I have talked about many times.
Oh, really?
You're Theranos 2.0, sir. That's what this company.
I learned a lot about Delaware law. I don't know if you guys have had.
I've talked about this company.
Yeah.
You in the text, you were like, I'm shorting this company.
Yeah, we'll tell you in a minute.
Right.
Yeah, you know what it is. But anyway, I've been getting a big a lesson here about Delaware law. There's something called a Section 220. Have any of you ever had to file one of these?
Oh, by the way, I did short it. It worked out really well. Sorry, go ahead.
Are any of you aware of what a... Oh, you sure? Any of you aware of what a Section 220 is or heard of this before? basically in a Delaware corporation, if you're a shareholder of any size, not just like a board member with 10% or whatever, if you feel there's malfeasance going on, you can file this 220 in Delaware. And according to this, a great Skadden Arps article on this, the Delaware courts are taking it very seriously that if there's any accusation of any kind of malfeasance, especially financial, any shareholder, even tiny, can get all of the books and in detail, not board minutes, not top level P&L, like detailed financials. And so for people who are running companies, and if you're involved,
this is private companies too, or
this is in private companies. Look up Section 220 of the Delaware General Corporate Law.
I remember at Facebook is because we had these vagaries of having to control shareholder count or stuff like that and information rights.
Yes.
We actually kept the financials on a physical computer that was not connected to the internet. So the people that wanted it would actually have to come to our office, and then we would put them in like a windowless room without their phone or something. Is that? I think that's how they avoided people filing 220 requests. And so it's just something for people to be aware of on both sides of the table, that if there's shenanigans going on at a company, founders think, well, I don't have to give any information to my shareholders. That is not true.
And it's not true. Whatever you have in information rights, whatever your lawyers wrote, is not above Section 220 in Delaware. So just keep that in mind.
I got a case like that right now going on where
a founder won't give you information?
Well, it's not the founder, but there's a company that just sold and they won't tell the shareholders like the terms of the deal.
What?
Yeah.
How's that even possible?
Good question. But it just reeks of fraud. I'm not going to say the name yet because I'm hoping that they're going to start acting in a more kosher way, but it's the most egregious thing I've ever seen.
All you have to do is talk to your attorney at Wilson, Fenwick, or whatever one of the cohort of Silicon Valley.
You literally have the management of the company. They've engaged in a sale. The sale's been publicly announced. We have reason to believe it's in the hundreds of millions, and they won't tell anybody the terms.
Yeah, file a 220. File a 220. And you know what? They're public. So then the crazy thing about these 220s is it used to be that all of the information had to be private. You had to sign like non-disclosures or whatever. And now, in certain circumstances, I think it's in the best interest of all shareholders, the 220 information can be public. And so that is just like a sniper shot to anybody who is doing any kind of shenanigans. We had a company in the same situation who wouldn't tell us about a sale. And then I have a call with the board because I own 7% of the company. This is years ago. And I said, can you explain to me what happened here? And they're like, yeah, well, we're doing the sale and blah, blah, blah. And it turned out the bankers were taking 40% of the sale, whatever. And I was like, okay, well, I'm not going to approve this. And you need my approval. Let's talk about how we can make this work, because we have outside funding that the company's turning down to do a sale that everybody's losing their money on. Doesn't make any sense. And they said, well, we can't really do that because we've already sent the 8 employees over to the new company that's buying it. I was like, what do you mean? Like, well, we ran out of money to pay them, so they all moved over to the payroll of the new company. I'm like, you haven't closed the transaction yet.
Wow.
It was crazy.
Well,
like, there's some weird stuff that happens in private companies.
Yeah.